Hi everyone. So the goal of this video is to understand the parts of the brain. So the learning target is to know the major parts of the brain and their role. All right, so a quick overview before I get into the things that I want you to know. So first of all, I would say I feel like the brain is pretty unique, and we as humans have tried to figure it out for a long time. And the reason why I think it's unique is because not only do you have medical professionals, well, actually there's many types of medical professionals. There's neurologists who try to study, the brain and the actual function of the brain. But then there's like psychologists who want to know like what's going on in a person's brain and how does that affect their actions. And there's psychology and there's sociology, and sociology is more about how humans interact with each other, but that's also affected by a person's psychology. So it's just a very interesting field, and the brain is such an interesting part of our body. And so over the year, excuse me, over the years, there's been many missteps along the way. One of the perfect examples of some missteps and people not really understanding the brain is lobotomies. So that's actually a picture I'm showing over here in the top right. So a lobotomy, for those who didn't know, it's a surgery that was common many years ago, maybe 50s, 40s, 50s, where people would try to maybe remove part of somebody's brain, trying to uh, take out something of their brain that affected their personality in a negative way. It turned out that wasn't really very useful. Really, what you ended up doing was take away a very important part of their brain and their ability to function. So if their personality changed, it was really because they became like a much muted version of themselves. And there's a few famous cases of this. One of which was John F. Kennedy's sister, who had that surgery done, and her personality really changed after the surgery. Um, and there's even a show on Netflix about this a doctor kind of in this time period doing some pretty interesting and not so great work. Anyways, but we've learned a lot, and it's not all been negative. People have done some interesting analysis and looking at people's characteristics and how and different parts of the brain, and if someone has something wrong with a certain part of the brain, how does that affect their personality? And we've found that different regions of the brain control different things. So looking at this picture here, you can see that the brain has many different regions that are kind of, in control of different aspects. Vision is controlled by the back of your brain. I know there's one part of your brain around here called like Broca's area, and it's basically in control of like maybe it's up here. It controls speech. So we've been able to kind of map the brain and see what does what do all the parts do. And we've even found certain drugs that can help us against certain diseases. So Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, we're trying to find drugs that can actually get to the brain and affect the neurons and the physiology on that level. All right, so let's get to the things that I want you to know. I want you to know the four major regions of the brain, and even within those four regions, there are some very important parts that have some very important jobs. So the four major regions, cerebral hemispheres, so you might have heard like left brain and right brain. So those are the hemispheres that people talk about. The whole thing is called the cerebrum, or you might hear about them as the cerebral hemispheres. There's the diencephalon, which is challenging to say, and then there's the cerebellum and the brainstem. So let's talk about what is going on in all four of those. So let's start off with the cerebrum. So the cerebrum has four major lobes, and all in all, the cerebrum is really what makes humans human. This is the part of our brain that is very developed. Our cerebrum is just more developed than a lot of other animals, and our ability to think logically and to think through problems, to think about the future, it really comes down to this part of the brain. And so it's responsible for your judgment as well, and receiving information and kind of deciding what to do. All right, the diencephalon has some important pieces that kind of control things that you don't really have to think about. Now we're getting to like the lower part of the brain that pretty much all living things have developed over millions of years. So two very important ones are the hypothalamus and the thalamus. So, and some others that are useful are the hippocampus and the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus, it integrates information from the autonomic nervous system. So these are like things that are not in your control. Again, things that are kind of doing things on their own. For example, body temperature, food intake, water balance. And when I say food intake, it's really like it's a key part in like figuring out if you're full or if you're hungry. And then the thalamus relays sensory information to the cerebral cortex, so it's kind of like a relay from your body up to the rest of your brain. It also relays impulses for motor information. So not only does sensory information kind of go through the thalamus, but motor information goes from your brain through the thalamus and then to your motor neurons. And then I'll quickly just mention the pituitary gland because it's pretty important. You know, it is called like the master gland, and it controls hormones that affect many body functions. All right, the brainstem. Brainstem comes down to three major parts that I want you to know: the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. And so you can kind of see where those are. And so when you say brainstem, it kind of looks like the stem of your brain. All right, so the midbrain is important for visual and auditory processing. The pons plays a really important role in controlling respiratory rate, and the medulla relays sensory input and controls many things like heart rate, respiratory rate, blood vessel diameter, vomiting. Especially vomiting is like so we can't really control that. So if we had to vomit, this is kind of playing a role in that. Uh, and you can kind of see like this whole list actually is things like we don't really have to think about. When you think about your brainstem, think about these things that all animals have, and it's not really any measure of intelligence. It's like things that you have to have for your body to function. Heart rate, respiratory rate, blood vessel diameter. These are things that are crucial for your body to work, and they're things that you don't have to think about. All right, so I think those are the major things that I want you to know. I want you to know some of these terms, especially, and I want you to know what do they do. So, for example, on some practice questions or on an exit ticket, I might ask you a question like, "What is the role of the pons in the brain?" Or "What is the role of the medulla?" So, I want you to be able to know what they do. Also, I might give you a picture of the brain, and I might have some lines where you have to kind of label where some of these things are. All right, so try to remember where these things are and try to remember what they do. That's it. Good luck.